The town of Maplewood, Georgia, wasn't the kind of place where people vanished. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was a kind of quiet, sleepy town where everyone knew each other's name. The kind of place where porch lights flickered on at dusk, where kids rode their bikes to school, and where secrets rarely stayed buried. But that all changed one summer evening when 8-year-old Lily Carter went missing. Lily wasn't the type of child to wander off. She was cautious, bright, and fiercely attached to her mother, Sarah. They lived in a modest home on Sycamore Street, right at the edge of Willow Park, where Lily often played after school. But on that warm August night, she never came home. The town searched for weeks. Volunteers combed through the park, checking every bench, every playground corner, and even the murky pond at its center. Flyers with Lily's smiling face, her curly brown hair framing deep, hopeful eyes, were taped to every lamppost and shop window. But the search turned up nothing. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And as the seasons changed, hope dimmed, the whispers started. Some said she'd been taken by a stranger passing through town. Others believed she had wandered too deep into the woods, lost forever. The most haunting theory, however, was the one nobody dared say aloud. Someone in Maplewood knew exactly what had happened to her. The janitor Ben Crawford had lived in Maplewood his entire life. He wasn't a man of many words, and he didn't need to be. At 56, he had seen enough of life to know that talking too much only invited trouble. He worked as a janitor at Willow Park, keeping the trails clean and the playground free of broken glass and forgotten toys. Every morning, Ben walked the length of the park with his rusted pushcart, sweeping leaves, emptying trash cans, and nodding politely at the joggers and dog walkers who passed by. The park was quiet now, emptier than it used to be. Since Lily's disappearance, parents kept their children close. The once lively playground felt abandoned, the swing swaying eerily in the wind. Ben never liked to admit it, but he thought about Lily often. He had seen her playing near the pond the day she disappeared, her pink beaded necklace catching the sunlight. He had waved at her. She had waved back. That was the last time he or anyone had seen her. For years, he told himself he couldn't have done anything differently. He was just a janitor, not a cop, not a detective, just a man who swept sidewalks and made sure the park didn't fall into ruin. But something about Lily's case never sat right with him. The discovery, it was a crisp October morning, nearly 3 years after Lily had gone missing, when Ben found it. He had arrived at the park before sunrise, as he always did, pushing his cart through the quiet mist. The leaves had started to fall, covering the ground in shades of orange and red. He was clearing a bench near the pond when he saw it, something half buried beneath the leaves at the base of an old oak tree. At first, he thought it was just another piece of lost jewelry, something left behind by a careless teenager. But as he bent down and pulled it from the dirt, his breath caught in his throat. It was a necklace, a pink beaded necklace with a heart-shaped pendant, Lily's necklace. Ben's hands trembled as he held it up to the dim morning light. The clasp was broken. The beads, once bright and polished, were caked with dirt. He looked around, scanning the empty park, as if expecting someone to step out of the shadows and explain how it had ended up here. But there was no one, only the silence of the trees and the cold wind curling through the branches. He had walked this park every day for the past 3 years. He had swept every path, checked every bench. This necklace hadn't been here before. Someone had put it here. A town on edge by noon. The discovery had spread through Maplewood like wildfire. The police were called. Sarah Carter, now a ghost of the woman she once was, arrived at the park with shaking hands. When she saw the necklace, she collapsed into sobs. "It's hers," she whispered. "It's Lily's." Detective Mark Holloway, who had been on the case since the beginning, stood with his arms crossed, eyes narrowed. He was a hardened man, the kind who had seen enough darkness to know that missing children rarely came back. But this was different. If the necklace had just been sitting here all these years, they would have found it, which meant someone had been holding on to it. Someone who wanted it to be found. Someone in Maplewood had been keeping a secret, and Ben Crawford had a sinking feeling that he was about to find out exactly what it was. The sight of the necklace sent a shiver through Ben Crawford's spine. His hands, rough and calloused from years of work, held the delicate beads like they were made of glass. The heart-shaped pendant, once a soft pink, was now dulled by dirt and time. His mind raced. Who had put it here? And why now? The last 3 years had been a slow, painful grieving process for the town, but especially for Sarah Carter. Losing her only daughter had hollowed her out. She wasn't the same woman Ben remembered. No longer the vibrant single mother who had chased Lily around the park, laughing as the little girl squealed with joy. Now, she was a shadow of that person, surviving in a world where a child had simply vanished. And now, after all this time, this necklace had appeared as if to mock her pain. Ben looked up at the old oak tree, its thick branches twisting toward the sky. He had passed this tree 100 times. Had someone buried the necklace there? Had it been hidden all along? Or worse, had the person responsible for Lily's disappearance come back to leave a message? The town that never forgot the news of Ben's discovery spread fast. By the time the police arrived, half of Maplewood seemed to be gathered at the park, murmuring among themselves, exchanging anxious glances. The last time the town had come together like this was during the first search for Lily. The community had rallied then, organizing search parties, knocking on doors, and questioning anyone who might have seen the little girl before she disappeared. But as weeks stretched into months, the town had been forced to accept the bitter truth. Lily wasn't coming home. Some had moved on. Others never truly let go. And then there were those who knew more than they had ever let on. Ben watched the growing crowd, scanning the familiar faces. Mrs. Holloway, the schoolteacher who had taught Lily's second-grade class, stood with tears brimming in her eyes. Mr. Jensen, the owner of the town's only diner, leaned against a tree with a cigarette, shaking his head. Even Mayor Langley had shown up, talking in hushed tones with the police chief. But it was the expression on Sarah Carter's face that made Ben's chest tighten. She knelt in the grass where the necklace had been found, clutching it as if holding a part of her daughter. Her hands trembled as she traced each tiny bead, tears sliding down her pale cheeks. "I never stopped believing she was out there," she whispered. Detective Mark Holloway crouched beside her, his face unreadable. He had been in charge of Lily's case from day one, and no one had taken the failure harder than him. A former Atlanta homicide detective, he had moved to Maplewood seeking a quieter life. But nothing about this case had been quiet. Now, he studied the necklace with an intensity that made Ben uneasy. "This wasn't here before," Holloway said firmly. "Someone put it here." Sarah looked up, her green eyes fierce. "That means Lily could still be alive." Ben wanted to believe it. He really did. But something about this felt off. Too deliberate. Too perfectly placed. As if someone wanted them to find it. The janitor's doubts that night, after the park had emptied, Ben sat alone in his small trailer on the outskirts of town. His old tabby cat, Whiskey, purred lazily beside him as he stared at the necklace on the local news broadcast. He should have felt relief. Should have been glad that maybe, just maybe, this would reopen the case and bring the truth to light. But all he felt was dread, because Ben knew something no one else did. On the day Lily disappeared, he had seen something he had never told the police. It was late afternoon, and the park had been nearly empty. He had been sweeping near the old swing set when he noticed a man standing near the tree line. The man wasn't anyone Ben recognized, tall, wearing a dark green jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He hadn't been doing anything suspicious, just standing there, hands in his pockets, watching. Ben hadn't thought much of it at the time. Maybe a hiker passing through, or a father waiting for his kid. But an hour later, Lily was gone. And now, 3 years later, this necklace had appeared out of nowhere. Was it a coincidence? Or had the man in the green jacket returned? A clue from the past the next morning. Ben arrived at the park before dawn. The grass was damp with dew, the air crisp with the scent of pine and fallen leaves. He stood beneath the oak tree, staring at the exact spot where he had found the necklace. Something wasn't right. He began scanning the ground, looking for anything else out of place. That's when he saw it, just beneath the tree roots, half covered in dirt. A scrap of fabric, barely visible in the dim morning light. Ben knelt down, his fingers brushing against the soft, faded material. He pulled it free and felt his stomach drop. It was pink, a tiny piece of fabric, ripped and worn, but unmistakable. The same shade as the dress Lily had been wearing the day she disappeared. Ben's hands clenched. This wasn't just a message. This was a warning. A town on edge. Again by noon, the park was crawling with police. Crime scene tape was strung around the old oak tree, and officers moved methodically, searching every inch of ground. Sarah Carter stood at the edge of the chaos, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching with wide, hopeful eyes. "They're reopening the case," Holloway told her, his voice low. "This changes everything." Ben stood off to the side, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. He could feel the town's eyes on him, whispering, speculating. But Ben didn't care about gossip. All he cared about was the truth. And deep down, he had a terrible feeling. Whoever had left these clues behind wasn't done yet. The discovery of Lily Carter's necklace had reignited a fire in Maplewood, one that had been smoldering beneath the surface for 3 long years. For some, it was a sign of hope. For others, a reminder that the nightmare wasn't over. For Ben Crawford, it was something far worse. It was a warning. As the town buzzed with speculation, theories spread like wildfire. Had Lily been alive all this time? Had someone been hiding her? And if so, why leave the necklace behind now? Ben had no answers. But something told him that whoever left that necklace wanted to be noticed. And that meant trouble. A town-divided Detective Mark Holloway sat in his office, staring at the evidence board. A faded photo of Lily Carter, her gap-toothed smile frozen in time, was pinned in the center, surrounded by old case files, search maps, and the newly recovered necklace. The town was demanding answers. Sarah Carter was demanding action. And Holloway? He was stuck. He had exhausted every lead 3 years ago, chased down every tip, and interrogated every suspect. Now, with this new clue, the case had reopened, but it felt less like a break and more like a game someone was playing. But who? And why now? Sheriff Doug Hensley, a burly man with a permanent scowl, stormed into the office, tossing a file onto Holloway's desk. "We got a problem." Holloway raised an eyebrow. "Just one." Hensley ignored the sarcasm and pointed at the folder. "That's a list of everyone who was questioned 3 years ago. Guess it just skipped town." Holloway flipped it open. When he saw the name, his gut clenched. Earl Whitaker. A familiar name, Earl Whitaker, had been on Holloway's radar since the beginning. A drifter with a questionable past. He had been seen in the park on the day Lily disappeared. At the time, there had been no hard evidence tying him to the case, just a bad feeling Holloway couldn't shake. Now, 3 years later, Earl had packed up and left town just days after the necklace was found. "Ran off in the middle of the night," Hensley grumbled. "Didn't tell his landlord. Didn't pick up his last paycheck. Just gone." Holloway exhaled sharply. "That's not a coincidence." "No, it's not," Hensley agreed. "The problem is, we've got nothing to hold him on. No proof he had anything to do with Lily, and no way to bring him back unless we find something solid." Holloway clenched his jaw. He hated this feeling, the weight of knowing someone was slipping through his fingers, just out of reach. But he wasn't going to let it go this time. "Find out where he went," he said, "and get me everything we got on him." Because if Earl Whitaker was running, that meant he was hiding something. And Holloway intended to find out what. Ben's unease while police chased old leads. Ben Crawford found himself standing in Willow Park long after the sun had set, staring at the oak tree where the necklace had been found. He didn't know why he was here. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was the nagging feeling that he was missing something. The park was empty at this hour, the only sound the distant hum of cicadas. The moon cast long shadows across the playground, turning familiar places into eerie shapes. Ben's eyes swept over ground. The crime scene tape had been taken down, but the earth beneath the tree had been disturbed. Dug up, examined, searched. And yet, something felt off. He took a slow step closer. Then another. That's when he saw it, barely visible in the dirt, right where the necklace had been found. A shoe print. Not a boot like the officers had worn. Not a standard work shoe. A sneaker. Small, like a child's. Ben's heart pounded. Had Lily been here? Recently? Or had someone else put this here, just like they had with the necklace? A chill ran down his spine. He needed to talk to Holloway. Now, a mother's desperation across town. Sarah Carter sat in her dimly lit living room, clutching Lily's stuffed rabbit in her lap. She had barely eaten, barely slept. All she could think about was the necklace. Had Lily worn it recently? Had someone given it to her before leaving in the park? Was she out there somewhere, waiting to be found? The knock at her door made her jump. When she opened it, she found Gretchen Mallory standing there, her neighbor, her friend. Or at least, she had been once. Before Lily disappeared, they had been inseparable. But grief had a way of building walls between people. Sarah had shut herself away, and Gretchen had stopped trying. Now, for the first time in years, she was standing on Sarah's porch, her face lined with worry. "I need to tell you something," Gretchen said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Sarah stiffened. "What is it?" Gretchen swallowed hard. "It's about the night Lily disappeared." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Gretchen hesitated, looking down as if weighing her next words. Then she whispered, "I saw something that night. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Twists unfolded at the same time Sarah was learning this. Holloway sat in his office, staring at the file on Earl Whitaker when his phone rang. It was Hensley. "We found him," the sheriff said grimly. Holloway sat up. "Where?" There was a long pause. Then Hensley said something that made Holloway's blood run cold. "He's dead." A new dead end? Earl Whitaker's body was found in a rundown motel 2 towns over. The cause? A gunshot wound to the head. It looked like suicide. But Holloway didn't buy it. Not with the timing. Not with the necklace. Not with Gretchen Mallory suddenly deciding to spill secrets after 3 years of silence. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The discovery of Lily Carter's necklace had thrown Maplewood into chaos. The past that many had tried to forget clawed its way back to the surface. And now, every shadow felt darker, every whisper heavier. But what had started as a shocking clue in a cold case was quickly unraveling into something far more sinister. Earl Whitaker was dead. Gretchen Mallory claimed to have seen something the night Lily disappeared. And Ben Crawford had found a child-sized shoe print in the park. One that shouldn't have been there. Something was happening in Maplewood, and for the first time in 3 years, it felt like the truth wasn't buried. It was rising. Sarah's desperation grows. Sarah Carter sat in her car outside the police station, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had spent the past 3 years trapped in the same nightmare. The empty bedroom, the unwashed stuffed animals, the fading scent of her little girl in the blankets she refused to throw away. But this was worse. Because for the first time since Lily disappeared, there was hope. And hope was terrifying. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her purse and stepped out of the car. She needed answers. She needed to know what Gretchen had seen. And she needed to know why the hell she had waited 3 years to say anything. Secrets Unveiled Sarah knocked on Gretchen's door, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. The seconds stretched long before the door finally cracked open. Gretchen's face was pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Sarah, I don't want small talk," Sarah interrupted, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Tell me what you saw." Gretchen swallowed hard, shutting the door behind them. She led Sarah to the couch, where she sat down slowly, wringing her hands. "I didn't tell you because I didn't know what it meant," she admitted. "And I was afraid." Sarah clenched her jaw. "Afraid of what?" Gretchen exhaled shakily. "That night, I was outside on my porch. I couldn't sleep. I heard something. A car. It was parked down the street near the park. I didn't think much of it first, but then I saw—" She hesitated. Sarah's patience snapped. "Saw what?" "A man," Gretchen whispered. "He was carrying something. No. Someone. A child." Sarah's vision blurred. I couldn't see her face, but she wasn't moving. He put her in the back seat and drove off. I thought maybe it was a father carrying a sleeping kid to the car. I told myself that's what it was. Sarah's hands trembled. "You saw my daughter." Gretchen's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. I don't know for sure. But now, with the necklace, I can't stop thinking about it." Sarah shot to her feet. "Why didn't you tell the police?" "I was scared." Gretchen snapped, guilt twisting her features. What if I was wrong? What if I had imagined it? And if I was right, what if whoever took her knew I saw? Sarah's nails dug into her palms. "Did you see the car? The man?" Gretchen nodded slowly. "I didn't get a plate, but I remember the car. It was dark blue, an older model. And the man, he was tall, thin. He had a limp." Sarah's mind raced. She knew someone like that. Everyone in town did. The town's outcast Ben Crawford sat alone in the janitor's supply closet, staring at the crumpled napkin in his hands. Someone had slipped it into his pocket earlier that day, for words were scrawled in shaky handwriting. "You're asking too much." His stomach churned. He had spent years keeping his head down, cleaning up after the town, trying to forget that he had once been a man people respected. Now he was just a janitor, the guy who didn't ask questions. Except, for the first time in a long time, he was asking questions, and someone didn't like it. His mind flashed back to the shoe print he had found in the park. Had Lily been there recently? Or was someone playing games? And if they were, why warn him to back off now? He didn't have answers, but he knew where to start looking. A chilling discovery detective Mark Holloway was running on caffeine and frustration. Earl Whitaker's death had complicated things. It looked like suicide, but the timing was too convenient. Holloway had ordered an autopsy, and now the results were in. He sat across from a coroner, who handed him the report. "I don't think he pulled the trigger himself," she said. "There's bruising around his wrists, defensive wounds. And the gun? It was wiped clean." Holloway's mouth went dry. "So someone staged it." The coroner nodded. "And there's something else." She slid a small plastic evidence bag across the table. Inside was a single hair. Holloway frowned. "What am I looking at?" The coroner hesitated. "We ran the DNA. It's a familial match to Lily Carter." Holloway felt like the air had been knocked from his lungs. This wasn't just a staged suicide. Earl Whitaker had been with Lily at some point. Maybe before she disappeared. Maybe after. The threat grows news of Earl's death spread fast. And for the first time in years, Maplewood was on edge. Was the person who took Lily still out there? Were they trying to cover their tracks? Or worse, were they watching? Sarah didn't know what to believe anymore. All she knew was that her daughter's case wasn't cold. It had never been. It had been waiting. And now, someone was making sure it stayed buried. But Sarah wasn't going to let that happen. Not now. Not ever. Because if Lily was still out there, she was going to find her, no matter the cost. Maplewood was no longer the quiet, forgotten town it had been for the past 3 years. The moment Lily Carter's necklace was found, the town's ghosts had come alive, dragging their secrets into the light. Now, Sarah Carter, Detective Holloway, and Ben Crawford were on a collision course with the truth. But the truth wasn't just buried. It was dangerous. A break in the case Detective Holloway's fingers drummed against his desk as he stared at the evidence board. The necklace, the shoe print, the note Ben had received. And now, the biggest clue of all, the DNA evidence linking Earl Whitaker to Lily Carter. There were 2 possibilities. Earl had something to do with Lily's disappearance. Someone wanted them to think he did. Neither option sat well with Holloway. His gut told him there was more at play, and there was only one way to find out. They needed to go through Earl Whitaker's house. A haunting discovery. Ben wasn't a cop. He wasn't a detective. But that didn't mean he was going to sit this one out. After the warning note, he knew someone was watching him, and if they thought a slip of paper would scare him off, they were wrong. So, when he heard Holloway plan to search Earl's house, he showed up. The air inside was thick with dust, stale and undisturbed. But there was something off about the place. It felt like someone had been there recently. They split up. Sarah, against all protests, insisted on coming. She wasn't leaving any more of this in someone else's hands. She rifled through old paperwork in the living room while Ben and Holloway searched the bedroom, And then they found it, a trapdoor beneath the rug. Ben's stomach twisted. No way. Holloway knelt, pulling the rug back completely. It's locked. Sarah stepped forward. Break it. Holloway gave her a sharp look, but Ben didn't wait. He grabbed the nearest object, a rusted metal lamp, and smashed it against the lock. The wood splintered. The lock snapped. And when they pulled the door open, a cold wave of horror crashed over them. Beneath the house was a hidden basement, and inside there were pictures. Lily's pictures. Not just from before she disappeared. Recent ones. The truth closes and Sarah's breath hitched. She reached for one of the photographs with trembling fingers. It was Lily, older. Her daughter had still been alive. A fresh sob clawed its way up her throat as she scanned the image. Lily's hair was longer, her eyes hollow. The date on the back was from 6 months ago. 6 months. She was alive. Or at least, she had been. Ben clenched his fists. Someone's been keeping her. Holloway was already on his radio, calling for backup. This isn't just a cold case anymore. This is an active crime scene. Sarah's grief burned into something else entirely. Rage. Whoever had her daughter had still been watching her, keeping her. And now, they knew Sarah and the others were closing in, which meant Lily might still be out there. And if they didn't find her soon, whoever had taken her might make sure she was never found at all. The phone call as they stood in the basement. Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated for only a second before answering. Hello. Silence. Then, breathing. A slow, deliberate inhale. And then a distorted voice whispered, Stop looking, or you'll never see her again. The call went dead. Sarah's hands shook as she stared at the screen. Holloway grabbed the phone. We can trace it. Ben exhaled sharply. They know we're close. Sarah swallowed hard, forcing down the terror clawing at her chest. It didn't matter what the caller said. She wasn't stopping, because now, more than ever, she knew Lily was still alive, and she was going to find her, even if it killed her. The truth was no longer buried. It was staring them in the face, breathing down their necks, waiting. Sarah Carter had spent 3 years mourning her daughter, 3 years believing Lily was gone. But the photos hidden beneath Earl Whitaker's house proved otherwise. Lily had been alive. Someone had taken her. And now they knew Sarah was close. The phone call had been a warning. Stop looking, or you'll never see her again. But Sarah wasn't stopping. Not now. Not ever. And if they thought she was afraid, they had no idea what she was willing to do. A desperate plan detective Holloway had been on the force for years, but this case was different. This wasn't just about evidence and procedure. This was a race against time. The phone call had been untraceable. Burner number, no GPS signal, no recorded metadata. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were doing, but they had made a mistake. The photos. Someone had been with Lily 6 months ago. That meant they had left a trail. And Holloway was going to find it. Standing in the middle of his office, surrounded by case files and crime scene photos, he turned to Ben Crawford. The janitor's face was unreadable, but his knuckles were white against his crossed arms. What do you know about Earl? Holloway asked. Ben exhaled, shaking his head. Not much, he kept to himself. But if he had a hidden basement, that means someone trusted him with a secret, and that secret got him killed. Holloway nodded. Then we find out who needed him dead. Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. And we find my daughter. She wasn't crying anymore. She was ready to burn this town down if she had to. The house and the woods, the deeper they dug, the darker the truth became. While Holloway searched through police records, Ben focused on old property deeds. And that's when he found it. An abandoned house on the outskirts of town. It had been owned by a man named Charles Grayson, a man who had died 5 years ago. And yet, someone had still been paying the taxes. In cash. No name. No bank records. No paper trail. Just cash payments every 6 months. The last one? 6 months ago. Ben's stomach twisted. What if Lily was kept there? Holloway didn't hesitate. We check it out. Now. Sarah grabbed her keys. I'm driving. A silent warning the road to the house was long and winding, cutting through dense trees and thick brush. There were no neighbors, no streetlights, just isolation. The house itself was barely visible through the overgrowth, an old, rotting structure with boarded-up windows and a sagging roof. It looked abandoned, but something wasn't right. The grass was overgrown, but there were tire tracks in the dirt. Ben knelt down, running his fingers through the marks. Fresh. Someone had been here. Recently. Sarah's grip on the car door tightened. She was here. I can feel it. Holloway unholstered his gun. Stay behind me. But Sarah didn't listen. She was already moving toward the house. And that's when they saw it. A symbol painted in red on the door. It was a simple X. But the message was clear. Turn back. Or else. Inside the house, the door creaked open under the weight of Holloway's shoulder. The air was thick with dust, the scent of mildew clinging to every surface. But beneath it, something else. A metallic tang. Blood. Ben swallowed hard. This place is wrong. Sarah moved past them, stepping into the darkness. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet, but she didn't stop. Not until she saw it. A single chair in the center of the room. Ropes, worn, frayed, like someone had struggled, and on the floor beside it, a small pink shoe. Sarah's breath hitched. She dropped to her knees, grabbing it with trembling hands. Lily's shoe. Her baby had been here. Tears burned her eyes, but before she could say anything, a sound. A soft creak from upstairs. They weren't alone. The chase begins. Holloway raised his gun. Ben, take Sarah and get back to the car. But Sarah wasn't moving. She was staring at the staircase, eyes wide, breath shallow. Then footsteps. Fast. Running. Someone was escaping. Ben grabbed Sarah's arm. We have to go. She ripped away from him, bolting up the stairs. Sarah. Holloway shouted, chasing after her. Ben hesitated only a second before following. The upstairs hallway was dark, doors hanging open, the air thick with dust and something else. Panic. Then, at the end of the hall, a shadow. A man. He was already halfway through a broken window, disappearing into the woods. Sarah didn't think. She ran, and then she jumped. Through the trees the moment Sarah hit the ground. Pain shot through her ankle, but she didn't stop. The man was ahead of her, his dark figure weaving through the trees. She could hear Holloway and Ben behind her, shouting her name. But nothing mattered. Nothing except him. The man who had been in the house. The man who knew where Lily was. Branches tore at her skin. Her lungs burned, but she was gaining on him. And then he tripped. Sarah threw herself forward, grabbing his arm before he could recover. Where is she? She screamed. He twisted, shoving her hard. She hit the ground, gasping as pain shot up her back. Then, for the first time, she saw his face, and her blood turned to ice. She knew him. Everyone in town did. And before she could say a word, he pulled a knife and lunged. Sarah Carter had been through 3 years of hell. 3 years of waking up every morning hoping that somehow, some way, she'd open her eyes and find her daughter Lily asleep in her bed. But now, she wasn't hoping. She was fighting, because a man standing in front of her, knife glinting in the moonlight, knew where Lily was. And she was done being afraid. The face of a monster Sarah's breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as she stared at the man. She knew him. The whole town did. Sheriff Allen Briggs. The sheriff. The man who had been leading the investigation into Lily's disappearance. The man who had sat in her living room, looked her in the eye, and told her they were doing everything they could. The man who had promised her that he wouldn't stop searching. Her stomach twisted. It was you. Briggs' expression was unreadable. Cold. Calculating. Then he lunged. Sarah dodged at the last second, rolling across the damp forest floor as a knife sliced through air. Briggs was fast. Strong. But Sarah was angry, and she wasn't alone. A gunshot split the night. Briggs froze as the bullet tore into the ground inches from his foot. Sarah turned. Holloway stood a few yards away, gun raised, his face dark with fury. Drop the knife, Briggs, Holloway ordered, his voice like steel. Briggs' fingers tightened around the handle. Then, slowly, he smirked. "You're too late," he said. Sarah's blood ran cold. "No," she whispered. "Where is she?" Briggs just shook his head. "You'll never find her." Holloway took a step forward. Last warning. Drop the... Briggs ran. The chase through the dark, Sarah didn't think. She sprinted after him. Branches whipped against her skin. Her lungs burned. Holloway and Ben were close behind, crashing through the underbrush. Briggs was fast, but he was running blind. And then he made a mistake. The ground dropped into a steep ravine, hidden by the night. Briggs' foot slipped. He stumbled, arms flailing, before tumbling down the embankment, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Sarah skidded to a stop at the edge, heart hammering. Briggs lay at the bottom, groaning in pain. His leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. He wasn't getting away this time. Holloway climbed down after him, gun still drawn. He grabbed Briggs by the collar, yanking him up. "Where is Lily?" Briggs coughed, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. But he still had that smug, twisted grin. "You'll never make it in time." Sarah's breath hitched. "She's still alive." Briggs' silence was answer enough. Ben climbed down next, eyes dark with rage. "Tell us where she is, or I swear to God." Briggs laughed. It was a horrible sound. Low, mocking. "You think this was just me?" he rasped. "You think this ends tonight?" Sarah's stomach twisted. Briggs wasn't working alone. But right now, he was the only one who knew where Lily was. And he was dying. She dropped to her knees beside him, grabbing his face. "Listen to me," she said, voice shaking. "You tell me where my daughter is, and I will call for help. I will save your life. But if you die here, then she dies too." Briggs' breath was uneven, his skin pale. But for the first time, his smirk disappeared. "The truth comes out, warehouse." Sarah's heart nearly stopped. "Where?" Briggs coughed, struggling to breathe. "Old lumberyard, east end of town." Holloway's eyes widened. "The abandoned mill." Briggs gave a weak nod. "You're already too late." Sarah shot to her feet. "No, we're not." She turned to Holloway. "Call it in. Now." He grabbed his radio. "This is Holloway. I need all available units at the abandoned lumber mill, east side of town. Possible missing child on site. Move now." Sarah didn't wait. She ran. Ben chased after her. "Sarah, I have to get to her," she shouted. "I have to." Ben grabbed her arm. "We will, but you can't do this alone." She turned, chest heaving, eyes wild. And then sirens, flashing lights in the distance. Help was coming. Sarah's hand shook. After 3 years, she was going to find her baby. And nothing was going to stop her. The siren screamed in the distance, red and blue lights flashing through the thick trees as Sarah Carter sprinted toward the road. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't thinking. She was running. 3 years. 3 years of nightmares, of dead-end searches, of whispers behind her back that maybe she was crazy for still hoping. But Lily was alive, and she was close. The race to the mill Detective Holloway drove like a man possessed, tires screeching as he tore through the winding roads leading to the abandoned lumber mill. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, hands clenched so tightly that her nails cut into her palms. Ben was in the back, his knuckles white as he gripped the door handle. The truth was sinking in. Sheriff Briggs had been part of something bigger, something that had stolen Lily away. But he wasn't the only one. And now, they were going to finish what they started. A place of secrets, the lumber mill loomed in the distance, a skeletal structure of rusted metal and rotting wood, forgotten by time. But tonight, it wasn't empty. Holloway cut the headlights as they pulled up to the overgrown lot, the car rolling to a stop. Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. Several other vehicles were already there, unmarked, dark, and then she saw them, shadows moving inside the mill. Her stomach twisted. They were here. Ben leaned forward. "We go in fast and quiet." Holloway nodded, his voice low. "Backup's 2 minutes out. We can't wait. We go now." Sarah was already moving. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. Inside the mill smelled like damp wood and old oil, the air thick with the scent of something even worse, fear. Sarah crept forward, her footsteps silent against the concrete floor. Somewhere in the distance, she heard muffled voices. Then a whimper. Her heart stopped. Lily. The sound came from a side room, just beyond the rusted machinery. Sarah moved before she could think, her body running on pure instinct. She reached the door and shoved it open and froze. Face to face with evil Lily sat on the floor, eyes wide with terror, her small hands bound in front of her, and standing over her, Deputy Cole Johnson. Sarah's breath hitched. Not him, not the deputy who had stood at her doorstep, assuring her they would find Lily, not the man who had been there when she first reported her daughter missing. Cole's gun was already raised, his expression calm. "Sarah," he said, like they were old friends. Sarah's entire body shook. "You took her?" Cole sighed, tilting his head. "I didn't take her, Sarah, but I was asked to keep an eye on things." His voice was so casual, like this wasn't monstrous, like this wasn't theft. Sarah took a slow step forward, hands trembling. "Let her go." Cole's grip on the gun didn't waver. "You don't understand what's at stake here." Sarah's vision blurred with rage. "I don't care." Behind her, Holloway and Ben moved silently into the room. Ben's eyes locked onto Lily, and for a split second, the little girl's expression changed. She recognized him. She trusted him. And then, without warning, Ben moved. The fight for Lily. Ben lunged, knocking the gun from Cole's hands. Cole reacted fast, swinging his fist into Ben's jaw. The force sent Ben stumbling back, but Holloway was already there, tackling Cole to the ground. Sarah didn't watch. She was already moving toward Lily. Her hands shook as she untied the ropes, voice breaking. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. I've got you." Lily's small arms threw themselves around Sarah's neck, and for the first time in 3 years, Sarah held her baby girl. Tears burned her eyes as she clutched Lily tight, feeling her warmth, her tiny heartbeat against her own. "I've got you," Sarah whispered again, rocking her. But it wasn't over yet. Cole was still fighting. And then a gunshot. Just as in the dark, Cole collapsed. Holloway stood over him, gun still smoking. A slow, gurgling breath escaped Cole's lips as he stared up at the ceiling, the last bit of life draining from his eyes. He had taken so much, but he wouldn't take anything else. Sirens screamed outside as the cavalry finally arrived. Uniformed officers poured into the mill, guns raised, barking orders. Sarah didn't move. She just held Lily. She didn't care about the chaos around them. She had her daughter. And for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't afraid anymore. The beginning of the end outside, the cold night air wrapped around Sarah and Lily as they stepped out of the mill. Reporters would come. More names would surface. The investigation was far from over. But tonight, Sarah Carter was just a mother holding her daughter. And that was enough. Ben stood beside them, looking at Lily with soft, tired eyes. "Hey, kiddo," he murmured. Lily blinked at him, studying him. Then, finally, she smiled. Ben swallowed hard and turned away. Sarah reached for his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Ben just nodded. And in the distance, as the first hints of sunrise touched the sky, the town of Hensley, Georgia, finally began to wake from its nightmare. The sun had barely risen when Sarah Carter stepped outside the police station, Lily's small hand wrapped tightly in hers. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel like a ghost walking through her own life. Lily was home. The little girl was quiet, her tired eyes flicking around as if she still couldn't believe she was really back in the world. Sarah understood. There were things they wouldn't be able to fix overnight, but they had time now, and that was everything. A town that couldn't look away anymore, Hensley, Georgia, had always been the kind of town where people whispered, where tragedies became stories and stories became rumors. But now, the people weren't whispering. They were watching. Because this time, the monsters hadn't come from the shadows. They had come from the places people were supposed to trust. The sheriff, the deputy, the very people who were meant to protect them. And now, with the truth finally out, the town would never be the same again. Loose ends and quiet goodbyes, Sarah sat across from Detective Holloway in his office, the exhaustion hanging heavy between them. "They're still rounding up people," Holloway said, rubbing a hand down his face. "Briggs and Cole weren't acting alone." Sarah swallowed. "Who else?" Holloway's jaw tightened. "We don't know yet, but we will." There was a long silence. Then Holloway sighed, shaking his head. "You should get out of town for a while," he said softly. Sarah frowned. "Why?" Holloway leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Because this story isn't over." Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her chest. She thought about the way Briggs had smirked, even as he was dying, about how Cole had looked her in the eye and told her she didn't understand what was at stake. This had never just been about Lily. It had been bigger, and she had ripped it open. Sarah's hands curled into fists. "I'm not running," she said. Holloway studied her, then finally nodded. "Then you fight." The first night home, Sarah tucked Lily into bed that night, brushing the little girl's hair back as she finally drifted into sleep. She looked so small under the blankets, her breathing slow, steady. Sarah pressed a kiss to her forehead, whispering, "You're safe, baby. I promise." And she meant it, because she would never let anyone take her away again. She walked to the doorway, turning off the light, but just before she closed the door, Lily's voice, soft and sleepy, stopped her. "Mommy?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart." A pause. Then, "I wasn't the only one." Sarah's blood ran cold. She turned slowly. "What?" Lily blinked up at her, voice barely above a whisper. "There were other kids." The room spun. Sarah couldn't breathe. She walked back to the bed, kneeling beside Lily, forcing her voice to stay calm. "Where, baby?" she whispered. "Where are they?" Lily hesitated. "Then I don't know." Sarah's heart pounded. She wanted to tell her daughter to go back to sleep, that she'd never have to think about this again, that it was over, but it wasn't. And now, Sarah Carter knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just a mother searching for answers anymore. She was a woman on a mission, because if Lily had escaped, that meant someone else was still waiting to be found. The town that would never sleep again a week later. Sarah walked through the streets of Hensley, feeling the town's eyes on her. Some people avoided looking at her altogether. Others nodded, murmured, "Thank God she's home." But there was something else in their eyes, something they weren't ready to say, because this wasn't the end. The town had let this happen once. It had looked away. Now, Sarah wasn't sure she was walking to a town full of victims, or a town full of people who had known all along. She stopped in front of the sheriff's station, staring up at the empty office where Briggs once sat. And then, slowly, she turned away. Holloway was waiting by his car, arms crossed. "You ready?" he asked. Sarah exhaled. "Yeah." Because today wasn't about moving on. It was about beginning again, and finding out just how deep this darkness really went. The final word: some stories don't end. Some stories begin again the moment the truth is uncovered. Sarah Carter got her daughter back. But now, she had to fight for the ones who were still missing. Because the nightmare wasn't over. Not yet. And this time, the town wouldn't be able to look away.